I'm terrible with grammar, so bear with me. I'm a long-time lurker with plenty of stories of my own, but I've never actually posted any of them. I'm 28 and female, and have lived in several sketchy neighborhoods, and I was a dancer in my late teens and early 20s, so I've gotten myself into a couple of bad situations due to how naive I was. I'll start with this one. 5 years ago, I rented in one of the worst neighborhoods in my small city. My boyfriend at the time lived in a short ways down the road that led to a big intersection. A few blocks away from the intersection is where his apartment was. So it's 10 p.m. on Christmas, and he had just gotten home from his family's house. And I had a couple things to do at home. I didn't have a car at the time, so I was really annoyed that he hadn't picked me up on his way home, and that I was still waiting around for him, so I stupidly decided to walk down this one way to his house. The way the street was set up, it was a few houses but mostly taken up by a large elementary school and a huge recreational field next to the school, and it was really dark. To get to his house, I had to walk the opposite direction of traffic, so any cars coming would be facing me head on. I make it about halfway down this road with the elementary school and field to the right of me, and the road on my left when I see a car approaching. I didn't think much of it until the car started to slow down. As the car comes up next to me, all four windows roll down, and there are four very large young men, 2 in the front and 2 in the back, and they start yelling at me, asking me if I want to come have some fun, and making general lewd statements in a very aggressive manner. I obviously ignore them, while picking up the pace and try to make it to this busy intersection that's well lit right by my boyfriend's house. At this point, they're yelling at me to come back, but there is no room for them to turn their car around, and the only cross street to come back around the block and pass me again was pretty far down the road. I was pretty nervous already, but then all of a sudden these dudes put the freaking car in park and all 4 of them start getting out of the car. At this point, I start booking it to the intersection. I honestly don't remember the last time I ran that fast in my entire life. Luckily, due to that one way, I was already pretty far ahead of them when they got out of the car. And they didn't have time to come back around the block before I made it to his house, and I'm not even sure they tried, but the fact that they actually put the car in park in the middle of the street and got out in the freezing weather, yelling at me and starting to chase me, was terrifying. My boyfriend got pretty upset with me for not just waiting for him, and truly believes that it could have turned out really bad. Needless to say, it wasn't the first, but definitely the last time I went walking around that neighborhood by myself after dark. Christmas Eve dinner at Burger King. Sounds innocent enough, right? Not my first choice, but I had to work late, and it being Christmas Eve, it looked to be my best choice. I got finished working at 9 and had some coupons for Burger King, so that made my decision for me. When I got to Burger King, I noticed it was still open, but the dining room was shut down. The only way I could get something is if I went through the drive-thru. Only problem is, I don't have a car. I tried to walk up the drive-thru and place my order, but the compassionate young lady working the drive-thru wasn't having it. She told me if I didn't have a vehicle, I could not use the drive-thru. I became rather aggravated and began saying things I'm not proud of. At this moment, an older woman in her vehicle appeared on the scene and offered me to jump in her car and order my food that way. At first I turned her down, not wanting to be a bother, but after some convincing I decided to accept her help. It took so long to get my food that I missed my bus and got pretty upset. The nice woman offered me a ride home, and I kind of felt off-put by the offer and declined. She was persistent, but at the same time nice, and convinced me to take her offer yet again. Mind you, I am 250 pounds, a 30-some-year-old man, so I really didn't feel threatened by a 50-some-year-old woman. If the circumstances were different, I would have not taken the ride. After I told her where I lived, we proceeded home. About 5 minutes from my house, she made a wrong turn. I explained that I live on the other way, and that we needed to turn around, or let me out here and I'll walk the rest of the way. It was then that the woman's demeanor changed, and she told me she could not let me spend Christmas Eve alone, and that she was taking me to her house. I told her I need to get home immediately to let my dog out, and I would be fine. The woman then tried to entice me with cocaine and liquor at her place. But since I'm in recovery, I told her I wasn't interested. She refused to turn around or let me out and started to drive strangely, not stopping at any stop signs. I'm not gonna lie, my mind was racing and I began to sweat. I knew that I could physically overpower this woman, but what awaited me at her house? I felt bad about hurting her after all the kindness, but I had to get away before her house and I didn't know where that was. so I didn't know how much time I actually had. Then all of a sudden, luckily, the car in front of us stopped at a stop sign, and across from it another was stopped as well. She had to slow down almost to a stop at this point, and this is where I made my break. I jumped out of the car while it was still moving, leaving my food inside, and took off running. As I was running away, she stopped, got out of her car, and began yelling at me to get back in the car with her. And that just wasn't an option. I don't know what her motives were or who she was, but I was not willing to risk my life over it. I ran all the way home and made sure I wasn't followed. What would have happened to me if it was 2 years earlier and I was still on drugs and drinking? Her offer of cocaine and booze would have probably worked. Kidnapping, murder, sex trafficking, organ trade. Being a man, the thought of vulnerability most women face every day was so foreign to me, and now I understand the fear most women face. I really feel this quote-unquote nice woman had a nefarious purpose, and that just so happened to be the perfect victim of opportunity. I never went to the cops because I felt they might not believe me, or they might look down on me for being so scared. Should I place a police report? What if by me not reporting this that someone else ends up getting hurt? Or am I just jumping to conclusions? A few years ago, I worked a huge outlet mall that never really closed for most holidays. It was Christmas Eve and I was scheduled to work until 8. Because I had to go to a family dinner right after, I was dressed nicely in a corduroy skirt and thigh highs. The shoe store I worked in was incredibly busy all day, and I was working register. There was never really a break, and I had customers one after the other. I made conversation, tried to upsell boot cleaner, and get emails for the company. In doing so, I was completely oblivious to whatever else was happening behind the register bar. I look over my shoulder at my coworker who was not looking at me, but right at something behind me. I look over my shoulder and there's this young guy standing behind me and he's got his phone angled upward right up my skirt. He quickly moves away when he sees me turn my head and leaves the store. But as he walks out, he turns and winks at me. I get this sinking feeling in my chest. When there's finally a lull in the rush, I go to the office and watch the video of this fucking creep coming up behind me and putting his phone next to my thighs to take a picture or video, whatever. I remember my manager, who was kind of a dick, just downplaying it, saying that the creep probably didn't get any clear images, as if that was supposed to make me feel better. I felt so violated and hate that I wasn't more aware of my surroundings. Quit that job not long after, but the memory of that has always stuck with me. Be careful working retail this holiday season, and stay vigilant. I'm an elementary school teacher. Winter break just started, and I'm feeling super joyful. But before break, some of the kids were talking about presents and Santa, and it got me thinking about when I stopped believing in Santa. Which is a story I'll share with you all, because when it comes to finding out Santa Claus isn't real, I had a pretty uniquely terrifying experience. I loved Christmas. I mean, I still do, but as a child, I absolutely could not sleep on Christmas Eve. I tried to spy Santa a million times. I'd wait for my parents to go to bed, try to sneak out. They'd catch me every time. Except one year. I was in second grade, so like 6 or 7 years old. I recall my best friend at school saying something like, pretend to be asleep. Then my parents will go to sleep faster, so sneaking out to meet Santa would be easier. Perfect. So Christmas Eve shows up. I'm riddled with angst, and I remember my friend's advice. Pretend to be asleep. And that's what I did. Before Christmas story was even over, I started to act sleepy. I don't know how my great acting skills were, but good enough to where my dad said he should just take me up to bed. I obliged and allowed myself to be carried. When my dad left the room, I think I waited just a few moments before getting out of bed to sit next to the door. I was listening for all the key indicators that the house was sleeping. What I remember most is how long it took. Forever. I actually dozed off. When I woke up, the house noises had subsided. Figured my parents had been in their room for long enough and decided to make my move. Opening my door with such grace, I slid out the doorway and started on my way down to the living room. A combo of tiptoeing and sliding until eventually I reached the couch. I dove into the couch, lifted the curtains, and then sat wrapped up in a blanket, peering out the window for Santa. It was snowing, and I could have sworn I heard sleigh bells. But I wasn't seeing anyone. I had a gut-wrenching thought. Maybe he'd already come. I squirmed out of the blanket and the curtains, looked at the tree and the stockings. Phew, he hadn't arrived yet. As I maneuvered back under the curtains, I'm shocked to see the man himself. Santa. He's walking though, no sleigh and no reindeer, but I'm not picky, it's Santa. I realize he's going to pass right by my house, but he's looking all over the place, at all the houses and all the windows. What's he looking for, I think to myself. Then, he stops in his tracks and gives another good look around at all the houses, before his eyes land on me. He sees me, and I'm ecstatic. I start waving excitedly, trying so hard not to squeal. He waves back, and then looks around before he starts walking towards my window. As he approaches, I notice he's got a bag with him, and I assume it's full of presents. He mouths or whispers the phrase, "Do you want to come say hi to Santa, sweetie?" I shake my head yes, and he points to the front door. I leave the window to walk over to the door, where there's another long window that reaches the floor. As I watch, Santa tries to open the door, but it's locked. I reach for the lock, unlocking the door. He tries again. From the other side of the door, I hear him say, "Okay, sweetie, you just gotta unlock the other lock, the one on the doorknob." So I try to do what he's telling me, but for some reason I can't quite grip the lock. My little fingers kept slipping. Santa then tells me it's okay, just go to the back door. Brilliant. I scoot over to the back door and I wait for Santa. He rounds the corner and the light from the back deck turns on. Santa is fully illuminated, and I now remember thinking, wow, Santa is a lot younger than I thought he was. Skinnier too. The lights seemed to scare Santa. He almost ran away until he saw me standing there. Then he proceeds to hustle towards the door. And he was telling me and motioning that I needed to be quick. He said I had something special for me, but then he had to go. He leaned down and was reaching for something inside of his bag. I unlocked the sliding glass door and pushed my hands against the glass and start to push the door by walking my body in the direction it needed to open. I'll note that even today this door is hard to open or close, if at the wrong angle, but at 6 or 7 years old it's nearly impossible. Just as he turned around, I heard the door start to give way, and as soon as it had, the home was filled with the awful sounds of alarms. I took my hands away from the door and to plug my ears, and I looked at Santa. He looked panicked, and I noticed he was now holding some sort of rope in one hand and the bag in the other. He drops the bag and reaches for the sliding door, and he slides it open no problem, and then reaches for me, but before I can reach back or move anything, I am swept up by my mom as my dad kicks Santa square in the chest, knocking him back several feet and landing on his backside. That's all I saw before my mom was rushing me to their bedroom and locking the door. My mom tells me that I didn't even cry at this point, which makes sense. I don't remember crying or even being upset, not until later. It was when my parents explained that that man who came to our house was not Santa, and my dad kept saying things like, "She still thinks he's real, of course she tried to let the guy in." Then I start crying. That was all while the police were there. What happened to the guy? He got away-ish. The guy took off once he gained footing. My dad didn't bother chasing him because he'd gotten the guy's wallet. The cops were on the phone and the guy left his bag behind. The bag was not filled with presents. My dad told me that it was filled with more rope like the kind the man was holding. There was duct tape, candy, miscellaneous tools like hammer, and lots of plastic bags and miscellaneous clothes. Yeah, it's horrifying. But luckily, he was picked up a few minutes after he left our house. Pretty hard not to spot the guy running around town dressed like Santa Claus. In the end, I forgave my parents for ruining the magic that is believing in Santa, because, you know, they did save my life. I'm not a writer, so please forgive any errors that this may have, and it may not flow as well as I would like. I'm doing the best I can. A little background first. This happened about 4 years ago. At the time, I was around 8 months pregnant, so it's very noticeable, and was doing some Christmas shopping at the local mall. It was around 9 at night. I finished up my shopping and headed out of the mall towards my truck. At this mall, there is a road that goes around the mall parking lot and is on the other side of the road. Therefore, you have to cross the road to get to the parking area. As I'm leaving the store, I happen to notice a man standing in the middle of the road. He looked in my direction and made eye contact. I looked away and kept going. the same time, there are two men that walked past him to go into the mall. He never looked at them nor said anything to them, but kept his eyes on me. I noticed that he started walking in my direction, but I just keep strolling to my vehicle. And I hear, "Excuse me, can you help me?" Being Southern has its downfalls, and one of those is having it ingrained into you to be polite. I simply just asked, "What do you need?" He looked around and said, "Could you help get my car started? I think my battery is dead." Maybe Southern, but I'm not that polite, nor am I stupid. Please remember that I am very much pregnant, and a woman walking alone in a parking lot. If he was really having car trouble, is it likely that he would ask a pregnant woman for help rather than two men that had just walked past him? Doubtful. So at this point, I know it's time to go, so I just say, "Sorry, I can't help you," and kept on walking. A little faster this time. I see him out of the corner of my eye, following me. I have my keys out and I'm ready to go as soon as I make it to the truck. He's still coming. "You really aren't going to help me? I just need a jump." Again, I say, "Nope, sorry." Finally, I got to my truck, unlock it, and jump in. He's practically running towards me now. I locked the doors and tried to get the key in the ignition, but I was shaking, and at that moment, the damn key would just not fit into the ignition. He gets to the truck and hits my window, saying, "I just need your help for a minute." I'm starting to get angry and yell, "No! Get the hell away from me!" He grabs the door handle and tries to open my door and screams, "Just open the door!" Here's where I lost my cool and made a split-second decision. I have my concealed carry license because there have been other reasons that I needed protection that I will not go into here. However, I did have a .38 special in my console that I do know how to use. When he tried to open up my door, the only thought was to protect my child and myself. I rolled down the window, grabbed the .38 and point it right in his face and say, "I'm not going to tell you again. Get the fuck away from me." He stood there for a moment in shock, I'm sure. And in that moment, time stopped. I don't know what he would do, but I knew that I was prepared to use this gun if he made any move towards me. Luckily, he didn't. He didn't say a word, just turned and ran. I know I should have gotten the hell out of Dodge then, but I couldn't. All I could do was just sit there in shock. I was terrified of not only what he may have done to me had I not felt that something was wrong, but also that I had to threaten to kill someone. Not a situation I want to be in again. However, should it happen again, I still have that .38, and it's loaded and ready to go. So man at the mall, I hope we never meet again.